Hi guys, this is Hari from One Man Venture channel. So basically, this channel was created just to share my CG work as some live traffic portfolio, something like that. I'm a self-taught 3D artist who has been doing this during the period of pandemic situation. But later thought that why don't just I make some BTS works and share with the viewers if anybody is interested in this kind of stuff. This channel basically will share both the short sequence of the work I do and some tutorials up ahead. So yeah, that's a little about me and this channel. Also, one more thing is that I have also opened a Patreon platform which where I share my project files and uncut videos. If you guys want to to check that out, I'll be leaving the description. And also for the future updates, you can look up there. So without further ado, let's get into the tutorial. And before that, I just want you to know that there are timestamps given for your convenience, so check them out. So first of all, let me turn on the screencast keys for you guys to follow. Anyway, I'll also be dictating some of the keys during the run, so don't worry. Now let's delete the poor little default cube from the scene by hitting the X on your keyboards, and begin by creating a plane by clicking Shift A. Then under the mesh category, select the plane. Then hit S to scale the plane, and I went for some scale amount of around 15. Oh, by the way, I also included the camera by just enabling it by Shift A, then selecting the camera options. Then place the camera according to your taste. I'll be placing the shot to my view. Now to change the focal length of your camera, first select the camera, then go to camera and look for camera settings options to the right panel. Then under the lens, change the focal length to 35mm or something. I'm going for 35mm. Next is just my preference for doing the work that I like to keep my focus within the bounds of the camera's viewport. So in order to achieve that, I'm going to enable an option called pass pop out. I think I pronounced that right. Pass pop out or something. Anyway, enable that, which makes the outer bound opaque and the transparent around the camera. So it's just my preference of working. Now we need to enable some add-ons for the handy operations, especially during the shading procedure. So go to the edit menu, then select preference, then under add-ons just search for image, then enable the add-on called import export image S-plane, which helps to import images to 3D scene. Along with that, search for an add-on called as Node Wrangler and enable that too, which will become handy while using the shading part later. And make sure to enable save preferences so you don't need to enable it for the future. Now let's import an image to our 3D scenes by pressing the Shift A, then selecting the import images planes under the image category. Then just import the image of the mountain for this tutorial. Also don't forget to enable emit options on the right properties panel, which basically lets each image pixel emit the light. Anyway, you can grab the entire scene on my Patreon platform. I'll be providing the link in the description. Next, just scale the image to fit into the background, and I'm also duplicating the background image to cover up the background scene. You can see that there is an edge going between the two planes, but that's not a big deal because it will be covered later when we place the foreground elements such as pine trees and moss clumps. Also, when we finally we give an overall focus element, it will be completely solved. After all, this tutorial is basically meant to fake the realism, right? So let's go to edit mode by pressing the tab and select the entire plane by pressing the A key. Then right click to subdivide the plane to somewhat around 10 in the subdivision panel to the lower right of the screen. Also increase the fractal amount to give a slight distortion to the plane. And just jump back to the object mode and right click and select shade smooth the plane. Now I'm just moving some of the vertices of the plane so that the line that we saw earlier won't be pronounced much. Next, jump to cam view by pressing the 0 on your numpad. Now select the plane and jump to edit mode. Here, right click and make the loop cut to the end of the plane, so also subdivide a bit so that later we'll use this area to scatter the pine images. Here I created a vertex group to the right, but later found that that's not needed because we'll use another fake method. Now import the pine images by pressing Shift A. Under the image, select import images as planes and select the image of the pine. Once again, all the files will be in my Patreon, just check them out. Now enable emit option, then import. Let me move that to the right of the scene for a little organization. Okay, now select the plane and here we'll make the particle system over the plane. So for that, select the plane on the right properties panel and select the particle property. Under the particle settings, click on the plus icon to the import the particle over the plane. Here we don't want to create particles as emitter objects but the hair particles, so select the hair option. Now you can see a lot of hair particles over the plane, right? So fine. Now go to the render properties down the stack and select under the options called render as, change halo to objects, since we are replacing all the hair with the object called plane. Now the plane is filled with image, right? Good. Next we only need to scatter the pine trees over the background of the scene, just up front of the mountains, right? So for that, the easy way to do that is just select the plane and just hit Shift D, then hit escape, or just right click to cancel the selection to the same place. Now select tab and jump back to edit mode by selecting the plane and delete the vertices by keeping the back row. Then just subdivide the plane once more for more geometry by right clicking and selecting subdivide. Now jump back to the object mode and rename the plane for organization, and also right click and set the origin back to the geometry. Here I removed the particle from the plane and added a new hair particle but you guys just need to duplicate the plane and remove the particle from the old plane by keeping the particle on the new subdivided plane. Now just as before, go to the particle properties. Under the render, select the render as object and select the pine tree image as its object. Also reduce the number of particles for your preference. Here I'm just fiddling around the particles for my preference. Next we can see that the rotation is not right, so in order to change the rotation of the plane, check the checkbox of the rotation. Now keep in mind that this function will only be seen when you enable advanced options just below the hair property. Fine. Now to change the rotation, open the rotation panel and under orientation axis, select global Z. If anything goes wrong, it's mostly because of your rotation issue, so in the object mode, select the image and then hit Ctrl A, then apply the rotation. That will solve the issue. Now change the rotation phase a bit to rotate the image face towards the camera view. Now the next issue is the origin position of the image. So in order to solve that, just select the image, then jump back to edit mode and press G to grab the image, then hit 0 to lock the movement along the Z axis and move upwards until the image origin is at the root. Then jump back to the object mode. Now our tree is placed at its root. Fine. Now I'm just fiddling around with the scale and randomize option of the particle according to my taste. Next, we'll open the shader editor below by going over this icon to the left. And in order to add a new shader to the plane, first of all, select that plane and click over the new shader icon and rename it to a water plane. Now one handy tip is that if your shader node somehow disappeared from the viewport, in order to get back, you just press the home key. That's it. It will reappear to the view. Now the idea behind here is to create a water plane, right? So import a new node called noise texture. For that, apply the command Ctrl Shift A. Now this is a handy tip to search for a node you want rather than going over the entire node tree. Just hit Ctrl Shift A. and you can search whatever node you want. Now this node will try to fake the ripple water effect. Select the noise texture and press Ctrl T in order to add the mapping node structure. Okay, so basically this is used to control the noise texture. Now on the noise texture, if we press Ctrl Shift left click, we can see the result of the node. So just play around with the scale of the textures, and also we need to animate this texture later. So change the options called 3D to 4D so that new value control called W will appear. Here we can control that later for animating the texture. Also I'm adding a node called bump. For that, press Ctrl Shift A and search for bump node and hit enter. Then connect the factor from the noise texture to the height portion of the height port of the bump node and plug the output of the bump node to the BSDF node. And to see the result, just hit Ctrl Shift click over the BSDF node. Now we'll reduce the color of the BSDF node to somewhat darker. Also reduce the roughness of the plane, as well as reduce the distance of the bump map to a smaller value. Now our plane is looking like a water body. Next I'm going to import some mouse collection to the 3D scenes from my local library collection. Just search for internet for the Megascan library, and the best thing is that it's all free of cost. So for importing any external collection to your scene, just go over the file, then select append, and then locate your collections and select append. Now your collection will be imported to the scene. Now here all I'm doing is just scaling and placing the objects wherever I feel is good for the composition. Also the main thing to keep in mind is that we need to fake or blend the background and the water plane, right? So to do that, I'm intentionally placing the mouse over the edge of the water plane so that from the camera view we feel that the area is covered with land and green mossy land. Always look through your camera view to get the composition correct. Now we'll jump to the render view by clicking right here, and make sure you select your render engine as cycles. As we see right now, all the planes are looking as blacked out, right? We can remove this by increasing the transparency value in the render properties. Anyway, now I'm adding a house model to the scene for the composition. This was modeled by me, but I won't be covering the modeling part because this tutorial will be lengthy. But I'll be providing the house model at Patreon, so y'all can get from there. Anyway, now I'm going to place the model according to the composition aspect of the scene. So in order to get the composition correct, we are going to enable the rule of thirds to the camera. So for that, I'm selecting the camera. Now one more tip. So whenever you want to select any objects in a scene but somehow you can't select or find it, you can simply search for the object in the search box right over here and select it. Now I'm selecting the camera and enabling the thirds. Now just go to the camera properties and under the viewport display, select thirds from the composition guide option. Now for the house textures, you can find all the textures from the free sources out there called as CC0 textures, Texture Haven, Polygon, which are mostly free. Then select the texture and press Ctrl T for mapping nodes and adjust the rotation of the HDRI to your preference. I found this value to be good. Next, jump back to the object mode, and I'm adding a sunlight source other than the HDRI to get some more light to the scene. To that, press Shift A. Under the light settings, light options, select the sun. Now one thing to keep in mind is that unlike other light sources, sun doesn't affect the position but the rotation. Meaning if we move the sun wherever we want, the intensity of the sun remains the same. But if you rotate the sun, then its light fall off will affect the scene. Also the angle, which simply means the harshness of the shadow. Now the scene is looking so good, right? Well, for the final touch, we can animate the camera. So for that, I place my playhead at 0. Actually, it's 1 anyway. I'm moving the camera towards the main subject, here the house, by pressing G twice, which will lock the camera movement along the local Z axis of the camera. And inserting a keyframe by pressing I on the keyboard. and selecting the location. We only need the location. Then move the playhead over the frame 240, which is end frame, and zoom out the camera by pressing G twice and inserting the frame by pressing I. Next, in order to animate the water, first select the plane, then jump back to the shader editor. Then at the starting frame, select the nose texture and insert the frame keyframe over the W value. Then at the end frame, change the W value a bit by hitting holding the shift key, then dragging. Because while holding the shift key, we can fine tune the values as we need. Also select all the keyframe by pressing A on the timeline and change the interpolation method to linear instead of Bezier. Now for the render settings, go to the render properties right here and make sure you are in cycles render engine. Then for me, the render device I'm choosing is GPU. Now the render samples I'm going for is 128. This is up to you, entirely up to you. You can go for even higher to 512, but it won't affect the it won't be much laggy, since the computation for this scene is comparatively low due to the image, like mountains, all the mountains that we have imported and the trees were is just in image, so the computation will be comparatively low. Now for saving the path, just select the folder icon over here and save wherever you want. Here I'm adding a number sign or a hash symbol at the end. This is just to tell the blender that to save the frame number to this placeholder. Now while saving this hash symbol, it will be replaced by frame number ranging from 001 to 240. Then hit accept. Now for the output format, I'm going for the PNG rather than MP4. This is just because it's a better way to render faster, and as well as if anything goes wrong while rendering and shut down the blender, your entire work may get ruined if you went for MP4 instead of PNG or JPEG. So most of the time, in my workflow, I always go for PNGs rather than MP4, because I always save my output as PNG sequence within command line. So that's now you can press F12 to render your animation. So that's it. Here you go. I hope you guys like this my first tutorial. I think this went good. I don't know, actually I'm new to this stuff, but anything went wrong, I'll be resolving that in my upcoming tutorials. So more tutorials up ahead anyway. So yeah, please do support and have fun. So yeah, hope to see you soon. Till then, stay safe, stay positive, and always keep blending. Bye.